Greetings and welcome back to 303. We are in Senior English A. I'm with you in your hymnals on page 498, and we're working now with the second of three offerings by the great poet Ben Jonson. We're going to look now at the poem Still to Be Neat. Now, this is the first thing we want to say about this, and let's do it right now at 2B when we talk about rhetoric. The first thing we want to say is that this poem will show the range of a poet like Ben Jonson. For example, we'll jot it at 3A as well. If you take a look at the poem that we were studying before, On My First Son, a poem that's really sad, really dreary, somber, for obvious reasons, the loss of his firstborn. And we turn now to a poem like Still to Be Neat, we're going to find ourselves working with a completely different mood. So let's write that down at 2B. A completely different mood is going on here. We'll ask, obviously, what that mood is. Let's take a look now and just read the poem and get some sense of what it is that we're talking about. Still to be neat. Still to be neat. Still to be dressed as you were going to a feast. Still to be powdered. Still perfumed. Lady, it is to be presumed, though art's hid causes are not found, all is not sweet. All is not sound. Give me a look. Give me a face that makes simplicity a grace. Robes loosely flowing, hair is free. Such sweet neglect more taketh me than all the adulteries of art. They strike mine eyes, but not my heart. Now, your textbook is going to try its best to try to give you some hint what this poem is actually about by giving you the picture on 499. So go ahead and look at that picture for a second. Okay, the picture of a woman, right, who is, got, kind of a certain type of pose. She's kind of sitting there, right, the way she's dressed, okay. And from that picture, maybe we can begin to guess a little bit of what's going on with this poem. But I want to help you work at level 1 here, that is to say, summarizing what's going on by asking a simple question. Who is this poem written to? If Jonson in the other poem was writing to his son, his young 7-year-old boy who passed away, writing directly to him, who is he writing to in this poem? Okay? And who is he writing about? All right? Now, the word still is a word always. Your footnote will tell you that. So that's going to be our first giveaway. Always or still to be neat. Still to be dressed. As you were going to a feast. Did you see it? And begin to kind of guess, who's he talking to? And the answer, of course, is he's talking to a woman, isn't he? Not just any woman. A woman who is always neat. Now, this is an interesting word because we don't use it very much anymore. There was a time in American English when we used the word neat. We would say about something, oh, that's so neat, meaning that's so good or bad. Well, normally we would say neat means like cool or good, right? Okay? But notice here the word neat has kind of an ironic use to it. Let's write it down. An ironic use. When he uses the word neat, it seems to be a bit ironic. Notice, still to be dressed as you were going to a feast, that is to say, to a party. Still to be powdered. Still perfumed. Again, each time you hear the word still, it's actually the word always. Always powdered. Always perfumed. Lady, it is to be presumed, though art's hid causes are not found, all is not sweet, all is not sound. And all of a sudden, a close reader of this poem goes, oh, wait. He's making a point. He's saying something to her about the fact that every time she goes out into public, she always looks like she's ready to go to a party. She's always put together. She's always got herself made up. And the question is, are you hiding something? Now, immediately, of course, we're going to have to remind ourselves of what Hamlet says to Ophelia in the great play, Hamlet. He will ask her, are you honest? are you fair or beautiful? And then he says it. I've heard of your paintings too well enough. God hath given you one face, and you make yourself another. He does not like the fact, he's going to say to Ophelia, that she wears makeup. Makeup for Hamlet, with Ophelia wearing it, makeup for Hamlet is proof she's hiding something. Of course, Shakespeare and Ben Jonson are pals. It's altogether possible that once or twice they talked about this. In other words, what kind of a girl does Ben Jonson most like? And it's interesting. It seems to be a girl that isn't always so neat, isn't always so dressed up, isn't always so powdered, isn't always so perfumed. Notice the break. Do you see the stanza break? So we get 6 lines of a first stanza, right? And then we're going to break here, so we can point this out at 2b. And now, in the second part of the poem, we're going to get the answer to what kind of girl does he really want. Let's take a look. Notice starting at verse 7. Give me a look, give me a face that makes simplicity a grace. Very interesting. If in the first part of the poem he says, I'm not totally sure I like a girl who constantly is always made up, looking like she's ready to go to a party, always has to be looking perfect. He says, here's what I want. I want a girl that has a certain look, that allows us to see her face, that makes simplicity a grace. More makeup or less makeup? Go ahead and write it in your notes at level 1. What is he requesting? More makeup, less makeup, right? And now again, we should point out, remember, this is the age in which drama starts to become very popular. But during Ben Jonson's life, all female parts on stage played by what? Males. Which means that Juliet is actually a young boy with makeup on to make him look like a woman. So this debate about makeup has something as well to do with that whole notion of drama. In other words, you're not what you appear to be. Notice he wants simplicity. What else does he want? Robes loosely flowing, hair as free. Now, of course, fashion is different, and this is one of the reasons for the picture on 499. Fashion is going to be different in Ben Jonson's era of 1600. What he's saying here is, I really like a girl who steps out without the really finest looking clothes on and doesn't feel like she has to have her hair all fixed up perfectly. In other words, I like a girl that is more natural looking. Now immediately as well at 3a, we think about Sonnet 130 of Shakespeare, don't we? The idea about my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. You'll maybe recall this poem that suggests my girl is more average looking, more normal looking, not so made up. Notice he says, robes loosely flowing, hair is free, such sweet neglect, more taketh me than all the adulteries, the makeup, if you will, the corruptions of art, makeup, right? They strike my eyes, but not my heart. Now this, of course, is a fascinating little poem. Let's jump to 2a really quickly and work messages, themes. If you had to say what Jonson is saying here to this woman in one line, what would it be for you? Is it that he's saying all that makeup makes you ugly? All that really nice clothing, you go to the mall, you have to shop at certain stores, you like to spend lots of money on your clothing, you always want to look like you stepped out of a magazine. Is he saying that he doesn't like that? Or is he rather saying, I like a natural look better. I don't need all of that look that seems to suggest money and therefore power. I rather like simplicity. A second possible message or theme. Let's ask it in the form of questions. Do you think that fashion changes over time? And if so, what makes it change? So for example, we have that line in the hall of all of those senior photographs. It's always interesting to me to listen to seniors talk about the ones from way, way long ago. They will often reference hairdos. They will often say, dude, what was up with all the girls' hairs? Or what was up with all the guys in their haircuts? What was up with that? Never thinking about the fact that at some point, right, going forward, at some point, there is going to be others that are going to look at you and your class and ask maybe similar questions about hair or about fashion, right? Okay. Let's jump to 2B really quickly. We've said already a number of things here. Notice the effect of the lines, the words, that kind of interesting rhythm. Still to be neat, still to be dressed, as you were going to a feast. Still to be powdered, still perfumed. Lady, it's to be presumed. Notice there's almost a lightheartedness about this. In other words, it's almost like he can say it to this woman, and if she then gets offended, he'll be able to say what? Just kidding, just kidding. Just messing, right? Notice as well the poem is interestingly constructed around 2 stanzas. Did you notice that? In the first stanza, it's really? Really? Still? We got to still look always like we got to step out of like a magazine or something? You never want to go in public unless you've got all your makeup on. You always got to make sure you look a certain way. You always, every time you put on garments, every time you put on clothes, you always have to stand in the mirror and make sure, really? Part 1. Part 2, I think I'd prefer you a little bit more free, a little bit more natural. The way you look speaks to me. Look at the last line. The way you look speaks to my eyes, but not to my heart. In other words, you look good, but I'm not sure that I can really feel for you the way I would like to. It's an interesting little constructed poem that almost seems to be asking her a question. If you could say it, what is the question he's really asking? What do you think is the question that he's really asking? Right, it's almost like, are you really there? Are you real? In other words, what would it be like to see you without any of your makeup? We've often asked this question at Worland High School. Would it be a good idea to have a no makeup day? A no makeup day where every girl at Worland High School has to arrive and go all day long and wear no makeup and can do absolutely nothing with her hair. Good idea, bad idea. Well, we've had multiple responses to that. Oftentimes students have said, worst idea imaginable. Be careful what you wish for, because if all of the girls showed up at this school without makeup on, guys would have to see them totally different. Which obviously begs the question, really? Does makeup change that much about who a girl is? Of course, this debate rages on, doesn't it? Do girls wear makeup because of themselves? Because of other people? In other words, is it a function of the way they think about themselves, or is it a function of the way they think other people will think about them? And are those ideas symbiotic? In other words, if you're in a situation where no one else is going to see you and you're female, do you still wear makeup? And the answer for some females is, yeah, I do, because it's the way I think about myself. Other girls say, no. If I'm around the house all day on a Saturday and I know I'm not going to see anybody, then I can be just totally natural. Ben Jonson says, bingo, that's how I want you. I want you to be like that. Because if you're natural and I'm attracted to you, then you can, look at the last line, speak to my heart and not just to my eyes. Interesting idea. Let's jump to level 3, relationships to other titles at 3A. Hey, what is for you your favorite movie that basically teaches this very idea? That there's a difference between the drop-dead gorgeous made-up girl and the all-natural girl who doesn't need any makeup to be effective in terms of, in the film, for example, maybe, getting the guy. Is there a film like that one that comes to mind for you? Is there a game, a video game even, that you play that emphasizes the notion of different types of beauty? Of course, we've always said this, there's 2 kinds of beauties, the beauty of the outside, the beauty of the inside. And when we say the inside, we're talking in many ways about what Jonson is, of course, gesturing towards, right? We've already mentioned some other poems that emphasize a woman's beauty as being contrived or real. Hamlet, of course, will stand. Let's write it down in Hamlet Act 5. When we meet that moment, Ophelia is now dead. Hamlet's girl. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. He's walking through the graveyard. The grave digger is digging digging Ophelia's grave. They're going to be burying her. Hamlet doesn't know. He starts bantering back and forth with the gravedigger. And then he picks up that skull of Yorick, who was the court jester, and he says to Horatio, his pal, I knew him. I knew him. And he's literally looking at the skull of Yorick. And then he says, he speaks to the skull, get thee to my lady's chamber and tell her to paint it on an inch thick. This is what she comes to. And the irony is, we'll say it when we study Hamlet, is deep and dark. Hamlet is standing next to Ophelia's bedroom, the place that she will soon be laid forever. And he's saying to the skull, hey, why don't you go find my girl and tell her this is what she's going to look like. So she needs to put on a lot of Maybelline because this is ultimately what she's going to look like. Not even realizing that Ophelia is about to be laid into that grave. But notice Hamlet references Ophelia's makeup. Tell her to paint it on an inch thick. Of course, an inch thick is a reference to Queen Elizabeth, who wanted to look beautiful, and so she would put eggshell, stick it on her face because she thought it looked beautiful. And then guess what? All of the wealthy people, women of England started to do, try to put eggshell on their face. In other words, people of power determine the fashion statements for everybody else, even though it's kind of goofy and it doesn't seem to make much sense. Let's jump to 3B. What is your thought about this? Two-part question. If you are a female, what is your thoughts on this? Do you prefer to be always made up? Or do you prefer to just be yourself? I come to school the way I look. They don't like the way I look. That is too bad for them. You are what you get. Or are you more inclined to say, no. Going to school every morning is like walking out onto the stage of a play. There is a certain kind of face, T.S. Eliot calls it in Proof Rock, to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. It quite literally is like putting on a face. I have a certain look. I've got to keep that look. That look represents something about how I feel about myself. Therefore, I spend a lot of time making sure that looks well. I would never roll out of bed, throw my hair up, and just go to school because I have a certain image that I have to present. What about on the guy's side? Jot down really quickly, do you buy what Jonson is saying here? I can look at a beautiful woman all made up and it will be attractive to my eyes, but not so much to my heart, because I wonder if she's hiding something, if she's just really good with cosmetics. Do you buy that idea that a girl who wears lots of makeup is a girl who probably cannot be, for some reason, trusted so well, as opposed to a girl who is just all natural and just shows up at school without any kind of makeup at all? Where do you come down on this idea? And finally, do you think a poem like this works? I mean, we asked this question at the end of Shakespeare's Sonnet 130, right? When he said, hey, you're totally normal looking, but I love you anyway. And we asked whether that was an insult or a compliment. What about a poem like this? Do you think that the girl that Jonson was with the night before, if she reads this poem, says, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and drop all the makeup because he thinks I don't need it. It's no problem. Or are you more inclined to think that she looks at a poem like this and says, oh, really? Well, screw you too. I got no interest in you then. In other words, did she take this poem as instructional or as an insult of a kind? Well, there you go. Still to be neat, Ben Jonson's classic. Thank you.